Isaac talked about remembering a time even when he was young that kind of sent your family on a journey of really praying and trusting God. But he told us about how your husband came to you and said he had prayed that God would basically grow and stretch you guys through hard things. I think even through trial, maybe even.
Yeah.
And you reacted to your husband like, why would you ask God for that? And then after that, sure enough, trials came. So maybe you can tell our listeners about that.
He came up and he said, I just, he was this connection that he was kind of going through and feeling with God. And he said something like, I just prayed that if it was necessary for me to go through the greatest trial of my life to stay connected to God, then if that's what it would take. And Isaac and I both, I was like, you prayed what? I mean, that's an easy one for God to just, see what happens, let the world do something to you. And that was right around the time of the 2008 crash, of the housing market. And we were in a business where we were building high-rise condos at the time. And at that time, the little banks were being bought out by the big banks, and all of our relationships were with small banks, very relational community banks. And one of those small banks got bought up by the big bank. And the big bank went through and decided which loans that they wanted to keep and which ones they wanted to call. And at that time, we had borrowed like $60 million to build these high-rise condos and had paid back all but like $28 million of it. And this bank had a portion of that. And when they called that loan, they were going to take the property back. And what happened was once one bank, our properties were cross-collateralized, which meant when one loan defaulted, they all default, which means they were going to take the properties and we were going to owe this money. So it was 3 years of battle and depositions and the bank coming trying to take the properties. And it was a really tough time of not knowing. I mean, if we were going to have to owe $28 million, how do you pay that back if they've taken the buildings and you have no way to sell the properties and make that money back? And so, this is when we started thinking about the other business and how do we make money? What can we do between the three of us? Isaac was a very integral part of that too at that time, to just keep going in the midst of this. Because really, I mean, probably the bank was thinking we would eventually run out of money and couldn't continue to fight. But thankfully, we had the people in place that were able to continue that fight. And John felt very confident in that God did not want us to declare bankruptcy. And so we did not, even though financial advisors were saying this is your only way out. And John had been out on a hike and came in the house one day and he said, I just really feel strongly that we need to just be praying a radical prayer, and that we just need to pray that the bank will drop this and give us the buildings back. And my reaction was like, oh, that's not going to happen. But we did. We started praying that as a family. And within 2 weeks, a phone call comes and it says, hey, the bank wants to settle. They want to drop everything and you can have the buildings back to be able to finish out. So just to see God answer prayer in that way was just an amazing thing. And, we had been, I had cancer the year before we moved over to do the condos. So we had been through a battle already, and had been through prayer. So sometimes in the midst of those stories, I always think, you read Exodus and you see the Israelites and they saw the parting of the Red Sea and they saw all these amazing things. And then how could they doubt God, or how could they lose faith and all of that? And yet, I feel like we do that all the time. We see things all the time, and then how easily we forget that God always takes care of us in the midst of those things. And so we have seen just answered a prayer in some mighty ways.
What would your advice be for, young women who, or any stage of life, who are like, give me advice about prayer. What do you have any advice for us about that?
Well, even in telling that story, saying this is what we prayed for, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, God answered it. God is not your genie. Your wish is not his command. And that was an amazing prayer to pray, but that was not the first prayer. It's not like that was when we decided to pray. We had been praying all the way through this, that, take this away, or do this, or this is, making the desires of our heart known. And those prayers were not answered in the way that we would have wanted. But just not to give up. And God's going to answer those prayers in the way that he best sees fit. Had he answered the earlier prayers, we would have just gone on, right, with life and like, oh, yep, that, But we had to get to a point where he really wanted to part the Red Sea for us, so that we could give him the glory, so that we really felt the impact of that in our lives and had a story to tell people and to be able to share with them that are in the midst of a battle like that don't give up hope, keep praying. And God was faithful every time. Maybe not on my timeline, maybe not as quickly as I would have liked. Maybe there was a little more pain involved, obviously, than I would have liked, but it was for my good, it was for our good, and it was for what we were going to learn.